My name is Wendy Sternberg. I run an organization called Genesis at the Crossroads that looks at ways to use art and education as well as humanitarian work to do peace building, looking at ways that art is neutral and yet creative at the same time and engages people to come together. And our work is in performance and artistic presentation, education, and humanitarian work integrated. So one of the best examples of that is our musicians called Saffron Caravan. They are from Iran, Afghanistan, Cuba, Morocco, Israel, India, and the United States. And right now, with a lot of the conflict going on in the Middle East, people say, well, I'm not sure about Israel, except our Israeli musician is an Israeli Arab. So we're always mixing things up and challenging people's assumptions. In the education space, we're creating an academy for global leadership here in Chicago, engaging people to be in a conversation, what is global leadership, and how do the arts play a role in creating a humanistic society? And on the subject of our musicians, we are taking them on a tour of the Middle East in September, all through different communities, working with youth in masterclass education, and in fact engaging a group of Israeli and Palestinian youth to be part of a junior Saffron Caravan ensemble network to work with our artists and carry this message forward. My prior career was as a physician, and I often get the question, well, how do the two come together? And they're very related through the aspect of healing. And as a doctor, it was one-on-one with a patient. And with Genesis at the Crossroads, it's community healing. I had a few points to make about the discussion today. And the first is that what changed my theory on life was the fact that the perpetrators of September 11th were, for the most part, the people on the plains, had tremendous education, had master's degrees, some of them had PhDs. Osama bin Laden actually is quite educated himself. And I had a theory prior to September 11th that what would save us was to take people who were downtrodden and educate them, and that would be the answer. And so September 11th really challenged that assumption that it's education or no education. And I have come to really understand that it's not a function of education check in a box, it's the kind of education that a person has and the kind of opportunity that that education allows them. So when political circumstances and other things suppress a people's or a community's ability, I'm going to say that again, when there's a perception that people who are educated cannot get ahead either due to political circumstances or anything else, and there's no opportunity for them, then the education becomes actually a detriment because it's a false promise. It's what Langston Hughes would call a dream deferred. And I think that causes a festering of anger. So I think if there's anything to learn from September 11th on this 10-year anniversary, it's to be cognizant of the kind of education we're putting out there and what we're teaching. And I believe that we need a humanistic kind of education where we learn about one another and value our diversity. My other point that I wanted to make is that I'm a little bit hesitant about peace circles and sit-ins and people who come together to talk about things. That it's one thing to talk about it and it's another thing to do things. And I have come to learn from particularly this peace circle that there's an aspect of raising consciousness that comes from a discussion. And some of it leaves you with a sense that you're not alone with your feeling and your frustration and your disheartening or disappointment about where a country's going, or the duality of pride in being an American and frustration in being an American with some of the things that aren't talked about yet are being done. And the other thing is that I'm very concerned about people doing a lot of things on September 11th as, well, I put a check in a box, today I was compassionate, I remembered this. You know, it brings me back to my mom, who I always used to say something about, why isn't there Children's Day? There's Mother's Day and Father's Day. And she would say, well, Children's Day is every day. And I would say, well, what about Mother's Day? It's only one day a year. And she said, yeah, well, that should be every day. And it's that kind of thing that I think if we're going to be compassionate, it's not one day marking an anniversary of a tragedy that we actually look at another person or a person who's of a different race or religion and have a sense of accepting them. I think that's something we have to practice on a daily basis, and not practice as a token thing so we can pat ourselves on the back about it, but do it as a way of living. So I think that I was a little bit reluctant to come to this program about September 11th because I created my organization not as a fix-it to September 11th. It preceded September 11th by a couple years. And it will go on long, long, long after September 11th is in past memory. But I think the beauty of it is to use art to connect people and to create opportunities for engagement where people don't profile the other as an enemy, yet are inspired by them and engaged by them. And I think that will alter our planet. I think for a lot of people out there, conflict is completely overwhelming. I think it's one of those things that, you know, America's at war in many fronts, the world is at war on many fronts, and when you think about it, you think, well, I have to be a politician or I have to be someone in a position of power to really affect change. And I think that you don't have to be, that I think it's a function of what you as a human being do every day and the individual people you touch, whether it's getting on and off a bus, whether it's something that you do in a grocery store, whether it's in a class if you're a teacher or if you're a person leading an organization, it's what you do with the people under you who report to you. And it's how you treat people on a day-to-day basis that creates a society. And sometimes it's just the small gesture, and it's not only the small gesture, it's just that those gestures add up. And I think if it's like being philanthropic or giving. You don't have to be a Kennedy or a Vanderbilt to give and be generous. You can make a small donation and make a difference in a very, very wide circle. So I say to people who want to make a difference, commemorating an anniversary of a tragedy is just do something. Just do something that honors who you are, that makes a difference.